get started by just telling you a little bit about who I am and how we all got here. And I want to make sure you know what we're going to be talking about. So I'm Deb. I was born in the Annie Warner Hospital. Anybody else born in the Annie Warner? Before the corporation smeared her name right off the face of the earth. Annie Warner was quite a woman. So I always proudly say that I was born in the Annie Warner Hospital. I'm a Biglerville girl. I was a Sando. And I grew up on Yellow Hill. And I'm a little apple picker. I picked apples. Yes, white people used to pick apples here. We all did. Didn't we? We all did. Families all picked apples. We did it in the summer. We did it for money. We did it to save money to go to college. Everybody picked apples. So my grandfather had a farm on Yellow Hill. And I heard that Yellow Hill had some secrets. So I heard about Yellow Hill all my life. My dad was from there. Was where my grandfather lived. And I heard there was a church there that was burned down. That there was a community of black folks in Biglerville that had a church that white folks burned down. Hard to believe? So I was interested in who were these people that comprised of this black community. Why don't they live here anymore? Being from Biglerville, so let's have a show of hands. Who's from Biglerville and who's not? Biglerville people. We've got a few.
Like from or living there now?
Just, you know, you're from Biglerville, you know where Biglerville is.
Yeah, that works.
Okay. Good. Yeah, you don't all have to claim it. I proudly do. I have a very proud family heritage here. My family were farmers, and we all need to eat. So I grew up on his farm, and I just wanted to know more about it. So I started doing research. I was just curious. And what else I did was just want to keep learning and finding out more information about other people. So I am related to George, you said it, George Washington Sando. George Washington Sando, I know it's corny, but he was the first, I'll pass it around. He is the only soldier on the that fought on the Gettysburg battlefield, the only private soldier to have a monument in his honor. For a private soldier, George Sando. He was killed the 26th of June, 1863. He was in a local militia. He was shot basically for his horse. I'll pass this around that way. So this is the monument on the Baltimore Lake for George Sando. He is my 3 great-grandfather's nephew, my 2 great-grandfather's cousin. So George lived down near the links on Spetland Road. So I wanted to write a book about George, but I never did. I got interested in this black community at Yellow Hill. So what I did was I went to the census records. I worked in Harrisburg with the Commonwealth, and at my lunch hour, I would go to the state library, and I'd grab the Adams County census from 1850, early census records, put it on a microfilm. Anybody ever do this? Now, you sit in your pajamas and do it. You can do almost all this online at home, but I did it the old-fashioned way. I get the microfilm, get to Adams County, and I looked in the column for race. Who were the black people who comprised this community? I found about 80 people living here in 1850 on Yellow Hill. So Yellow Hill is a subject of the book that I wrote. It's just an easy, quick read. It's about the abolitionist Quakers at Manalapan Friends meeting. And they worked with black folks on Yellow Hill. So you've got the Quaker Valley where all these Quakers live, the white Quakers. And then you've got Yellow Hill right beside it. And there was a community of free Negroes that lived there before the Civil War. Now, when I would look on the 1858 map, that's a map. Anybody buy an old house around here? You can find out who owned it in a heartbeat. Look at the 1858 map. It's been reproduced, $20. I bought it at the Historical Society. It's wrinkled and torn, and I use it all the time for research. So you can find out who lived in your house when. So I researched the people of Yellow Hill. I compiled this book. I found information that I just couldn't stop being surprised about. So I created a few tours, the Underground Railroad tour in Gettysburg, and I do a Black History tour in Gettysburg. I was a member of the Visitor Center Extension Bureau for 10 years. I got a little frustrated that they weren't promoting Black history at all. I started doing this after Barack Obama was elected, and I thought, oh, Black history's gonna take off. It's gonna be great. Gettysburg. Oh, I got a big story to tell. I'm gonna make so much money. And I had a really hard time getting the people that ran the visitor center to back me, and it was frustrating. 10 years, I just said, the heck with it. So I think it was institutional racism. I've also run into it at the Gettysburg National Military Park. I've been told you're not gonna find anything on those people from Yellow Hill. I bet you want to change the name of Yellow Hill, somebody said. No, I really don't. So let's talk about the name of Yellow Hill. I went to an old map and I found that it was really called Pine Hill. Yellow is a term to define people of mixed race. The Yellow Rose of Texas was about a brown-skinned woman. Okay, now here comes the sex education lesson. How did these mulatto people that I found in the census record, people of mixed race, how did this happen? Was this consensual sex? Or was it rape? Rape. Masters raping their enslaved females. And I found it over and over. The best thing that I found about all my research is the story of Kitty Payne. So let's get going. I think I have 67 slides, so that's 2 per minute if I roll in a half an hour. So I'll try to not hinder your view a whole lot. So we're going to talk about these Quakers, and we're going to talk about Yellow Hill. So I'm going to go between the 2 communities, and I'm going to bombard you with so much information. I hope you walk out of here and go, oh, she said so much, can't even remember it all. Because when I walk out of a room or a conference, that's the feeling I want. I got so much information, I'm blown away.
Deb, do you show us at some point where in Biglerville Yellow Hill was?
I certainly can.
Okay.
So there's 2 ways to see the Yellow Hill Road. When you're in the center square of Biglerville, if you go towards Hollaball's Farm Market on 34 North the Carlisle, on the left after Hollaball's Market, you'll see Yellow Hill Road, about a mile and a half. If you are going to Arntsville from Biglerville Center Square, there's a real sharp curve where Scott Slayball lived. Yellow Hill Road is right there. So the square of Biglerville is here, with the crossroads, and Yellow Hill connects like the northwest quadrant. It's up in there. So there was a Black church there. There were 80 people living there that were counted in the census. I found descendants of some of the people that lived there. I found deeds, families, the Matthews family, and I found relatives still living in this area. And that's kind of what blew me away. The 1858 map, I would look at it, and I would see Sandos, and I would see Lowers, and names of the people that I went to school with. But the Black people that I found in the census that lived there in 1850 weren't here anymore. They owned property. They had bought property here. Why didn't their grandchildren graduate with me? Was the church burning the reason this Black community left? I don't think so. From my research, I believe it was economic reasons. So they were here because Quakers were here. Quakers were an organized religion that said, we don't think that people should own other people. And they used scripture in Deuteronomy that said, you should not oppress poor people. And they used scripture in Deuteronomy that said, if a poor person comes to you, you should feed them. You should help them. You should let them live with you. You should not oppress them, or that is a sin in you. Quakers in the 1770s told their members, you can't own slaves anymore if you want to continue to be a member of this Quaker meeting. So the Manawan Friends, I drove by that Quaker meeting house my whole life, having no idea the progressive and amazing thing these people did in these buildings. There's another one near York Springs. This is the Huntington meeting that was laid down around the time of the Civil War. Many of their members transferred from York Springs to Bendersville, from Huntington to Manawan. The fertile soil, the rocky hills, were great for growing apples. And these Quakers came here, they had nurseries, And we've got the Adams County Fruit Growers Association, the Apple Harvest Festival. And many of these things came from these early fruit growers that were here, and many of them were Quakers. And they had free Negroes living on their farms and living near them. They were giving them jobs, helping them make a living, and possibly educating some of their children. I believe that some of the black children in the Matthews family may have been educated in the Quaker meeting school. And I found several schools near Bendersville. And the Manal and Friends Meeting House, this is right on 234. You know where the big black mansion is? It's right across from that. And that was also a Quaker home. So I nominated sites to the Network to Freedom. This was years-long initiative to get these sites recognized on the National Park Service, National Underground Railroad Network to Freedom. There are 4 sites in Adams County that have been named. The Manal and Friends Meeting, Yellow Hill because of Ed Matthews, Cyrus Grace, William and Phoebe Wright at Huntington Meeting, and McAllister's Mill. 4. And there are more places that were involved in the Underground Railroad. For this nomination, you have to have the permission of the owner. You have to have documentation to prove it at a time where proving things wasn't real easy. You're not going to write on the wall, hey, we're helping in the Underground Railroad, because you were breaking a federal law to aid and abet a freedom seeker. And I challenge you to just think about, what would you do? If someone knocked on your door and they were hungry, would you feed them or would you send them away? These people believed that you should be human. You should help people. You should let them prosper. If I'm here and I made it, I should pull you up and bring you with me. And these Quakers were amazing and so progressive. So I'm going to talk about a lot of the really cool stuff they did. So the present site of the Quaker meeting on Route 34, about 3 miles north of Biglerville. This is the earlier Quaker meeting that was there. It's been there since the 1830s. This meeting house was there earlier. Previous to that, there was a site near Center Mills. If you're driving on 234 near the Center Mills Road, you can see dots in there of a cemetery. And that was the first Quaker meeting cemetery. Now, I know the church on the Center Mills Road that is now a residence used to be the Biglerville Grange. Remember, Greg, where the Grange was? Behind that. There's a cemetery there at that building, but it's behind that in a field below it. So that location was where the Quakers first were. In the 1821 map, I think the Manallen Road ends right there, and it says Quaker Temple is right there. So that's the first location, and then they moved up to Bendersville at the present location where they are today. And this is the meeting house, built in the 1880s to replace that one that was put there in the 1830s. This fence there was forged in Gettysburg, cast iron, by Charles Tyson. Charles Tyson was a Gettysburg photographer. He and his brother moved from the Philadelphia area to Gettysburg and started their photography business. And then they drove their carriage up to Manal and Friends meeting, and Cyrus Grace said, oh, come back next week and plan to have lunch at our house. And he had 4 single daughters. Charles Tyson fell in love with Mariah Grace, and Charles Tyson they are buried there together. So I'm going to talk about Grist a lot. G-R-I-E-S-T. So this is still an active Quaker meeting. You can visit. You can stop in and attend a Quaker meeting. There's no music. There's no preacher. It's pretty much silent worship. People that just smile at each other, greet each other, meditate, read the Bible, share some thoughts, shake hands, and return to the world. Quakers really believe that it's not so important what they do when they're in the Quaker meeting house, but it's more important what they do when they go outside of the Quaker meeting house. How they treat people 24/7, how they treat their fellow human beings, and whether they act in the eyes of God. And by the way, what I'm talking about here is before the born again movement. These people believed you should follow the scripture every day of your life and leave an audit trail. You know, no last minute change your mind, and you know, and I'm not bashing anyone's beliefs, but this was before that was a belief. They studied the scripture. They wanted the words in the Bible to dictate their life. And they wanted to get to heaven. And they thought that they needed to live every day according to the scripture in order to do that. So I encourage you to try to stop into a Quaker meeting or just visit them. And the cemeteries are interesting. This is the one up in Huntington. 1790, slate roof. Slate roof on that one is really neat. There it is. William Penn, of course, founded Pennsylvania, Quakers. So Quakers, this is the Quaker state. Why don't we know more about Quakers? We confuse them sometimes with Mennonites. They're completely different sect. Quakers, an organized religion that told their members you can't be slave owners. And then they harbored and aided and abetted the enslaved. So here's a good depiction of our good Quakers, am I right? This guy lived near York Springs, and he lived right behind York Springs Auto Auction. I've had his deeds traced. So that was his first nursery, and then he lived on Latimer Valley Road. He had two nurseries, Woodburn, the other one's escaping me. But William Wright and Phoebe, in their lifetime, aided 1,000 runaway slaves. How do I know? There's a book written by a man in Philadelphia named William Still. William Still was a black man, a free black man, who kept records of every runaway slave that came in through his office. One day he met his brother. His brother, Peter Still. Like, what's your name? Peter Still. Oh my gosh, you're my brother. One was enslaved, one was given freedom. They found then. They tried to get Peter Still's family back. Seth Conklin, a Quaker man, died in that rescue. So these Quakers put it on the line. They literally did. And the federal fugitive slave law, again, made it illegal to help people. But the Wrights did. Now, in William Still's book, here's how they communicated before they had the internet and messages, newspapers, letters. They wrote letters. And here's in William Still's book is a letter about William Wright. It says, I just received a letter from my friend William Wright of York Sulphur Springs, PA. He says by writing to you, I might get some information about the transportation of some property from this vicinity to your neighborhood. It was Washington, D.C. to Philadelphia. It is for the removal of only one small package, but it's been determined the removal cannot be safely effected without taking two larger packages with it. What do you think they're talking about? So that's how they transported people. They spoke in code. And William Still says William Wright and his wife Phoebe Wireman. We play pickleball with Bob Wireman. Wireman's Wrights really involved in the Underground Railroad here. 1,000 runaway slaves. And this was their home. It was painted white on the bottom, that you can see it. It's 3 walls still stand, the roof is gone, one whole side. I have a brick from that at the Adams County Historical Society. So freedom seekers found their way here. It was a place where they would seek refuge. How did they hide runaway slaves in their homes? Up in the, so let's look here at the eave of this attic, right here, this area. What if you put a wall down in there? They call it a knee wall. Anybody ever see these cubbyholes? I think I have a picture of it. So this is the Wright house, and they built this house to hide freedom seekers in it. And they, and I've also been in another house near York Springs that was a Wireman house, and they had the same feature. And when I saw the door that was in that knee wall on the floor, I picked it up, and there was like a handle on the inside and a handle on the outside of the door, so you could shut it from the inside or open it from the outside. So here we go. This shows the knee wall. Now, just because you find a house that has a knee wall doesn't mean they were hiding black people in there. This is a common storage area in a house. This was a freedom seeker that came through York Springs, and he wrote a book. The Wrights taught him to read and write, and he wrote a book in, I think, 1827. He published it, called The Fugitive Blacksmith. And then a book was written about him, which I happen to have right here. And this is your homework, to get this book and read it. It's about Adams County Quakers, a national book. I'm sorry, that's the wrong book. I'm sorry. Oh no, this is the right book. 2 books that you need to read. American to the Backbone. This is about Pennington. This was written by a gentleman from New England that came to see me, and we walked the tree stand trail. Some guy had a tree stand near the Wright House, and I knew where to park and go in, and that's what we did. I said, wear boots, and I'll take you to the Wright House. So we went down through the woods, across the creek, and I showed him the Wright House. So this was American to the Backbone, written about a freedom seeker from Hagerstown, ran on his own, taught to read and write by the Wrights in York Springs. He wrote a book, The Fugitive Blacksmith. He said, I came to the home of P.W. and W.W., Phoebe Wright and William Wright. Not ready to enter. I knocked on the door, and they answered, and I said, I'm in search of employ. And Mr. Wright said, well, come in and get some breakfast and get warm, and we'll talk about it. Pennington said, those words spoken to me by a stranger, but with such an air of simple sincerity and fatherly kindness, made me think gave me an overwhelming impression upon my mind. He was the first white man to ever treat me with kindness. William Wright took him in, taught him to read and write, and this book is written about him. And this is another great read for your homework assignment. This is about these Quakers from a national perspective. These Quakers had ties with people on the national scene. The lady living in New York Springs, Lydia Lundy. Her half-brother was Benjamin Lundy. He had a newspaper, The Genius of Universal Emancipation, which was later transferred to William Lloyd Garrison. So these people here had ties with people on the national scene. Pennington, he changed his name. His name was Jim Pembroke. When he ran, he changed it to James William Charles Pennington, taking the William from William Wright in York Springs. And his son, William and Phoebe's son, General Wyman Wright, was an engineer and head of the railroads in Pennsylvania. And he had seen freedom seekers come through his home as a child living there in York Springs. And he used black men in the Civil War to help Sherman with the March to the Sea and the fall of Atlanta. With black men of African descent, Colonel Wright helped Sherman to be victorious in that. And I read that in Sherman's memoirs. I had read that Sherman praised Colonel Wright. And I skimmed the memoirs, found it, and he absolutely did. The intelligent and energetic action of Colonel Wright, he told Johnston after the war, was the reason that he was successful. But he didn't say that there were black troops that were helping him. And General William Ryman Wright buried at Huntington Meeting. So this is the 1858 map. This shows us Wrightsville. This is the area of Floridale. And this is Yellow Hill, and it says Pine Hill. So the book I wrote is about the black folks that live here on what was Pine Hill that became called Yellow Hill. And I told you why it's called Yellow Hill, the complexion of people of mixed race in Biglerville. Yellow Hill. And here's Annie Matthews. Then they spelled their name with 1 T. And this Matthews, I found their deed in the courthouse. I couldn't find it for a while. I was lecturing to senior citizens, and Betty Pitzer, retired clerk of courts, told me to go to the basement, Debbie, and there's a cage of records down there, and you just tell them that her niece was elected. You tell Betsy that you want in a cage in the basement, and you want in that box of unrecorded deeds. And in there is where I found Ed Matthews' deed. Wow. He bought $350, got him 16 acres in 1842. And he put a church on that land, and that's the church that was burned. So Ed Matthews and the Matthews family on Yellow Hill were from Maryland, and they were free, and they lived in Pennsylvania freely near the Quakers. And the Matthews had 3 sons who were in the Civil War in the U.S. colored troops. I could lecture on the colored troops for like 2 hours, so I'm going to have to skip all that, but I'm telling you, there are so many amazing stories there. Now, this is our good old Adams County people, Cyrus and Mary Ann Cook Grist. Cyrus Christ paid $100 to get an attorney in Virginia to defend Kitty Payne after she was kidnapped from Bendersville in 1843. July 24th, 1845, she is kidnapped. And then Cyrus Christ pays $100. She sued a white man. Kitty Payne was enslaved in Virginia, freed by her owner, lived in Bear Mountain in Bendersville, and 5 men kidnapped her and her 3 children in the middle of the night to take them back down to Virginia. And the 5 men who kidnapped her, one was her cousin, Sam Maddox Jr. He felt he should inherit them according to his uncle's will, and he just hired 4 other men. They kidnapped her, they beat her, they gagged her, they threw her in a wagon, and then they put him in jail in Rappahannock County, Virginia. And there they were for over 300 days. And so Cyrus Christ put up his money. They got an attorney to defend her. A black woman sued a white man in 1845 in Virginia. Unheard of. Because Cyrus Christ gave $100 to Zephaniah Turner. She didn't win. 12 jurors, 7 of the 12 jurors were slave owners in Virginia who judged her. The kidnappers were found guilty here in Pennsylvania, but there was no one to put in jail. Our Adams County Sheriff wrote to the Virginia Sheriff in Rappahannock County and said, bring Sam Maddox up here for kidnapping charges. Sheriff in Virginia said, nope, we don't quite see it that way. We're not helping you. This is why the Civil War had to be. The difference in states' laws. That you could have a free woman kidnapped from her home in the middle of the night, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. So they were found guilty in Pennsylvania courts, but nobody was put in jail except Thomas Finnegan when he was coming back to get some more. Thomas Finnegan was one of the 5 men. He was a renowned kidnapper from Hagerstown, Maryland. Right now I'm looking for his descendants because I want to find that kidnapper's kids. And I want them to meet Kitty Payne's children. And I'm working on it. It might happen. That's the geeky stuff I do. So this is on the Quaker Valley Road. This is Cyrus Christ's house. Ed Matthews of Yellow Hill would bring runaways down to that Quaker farm, tap on the window of the bedroom to wake them up so that they knew they had to go to the barn or the spring house to get those people, feed them, and take them to the next safe house. Their cousins, William Wright, over in York Springs, were part of that network. And so they hid them in the barn or the spring house at this property. And he was a nurseryman in the 1850s. So how did we get all these orchards? Somebody had to be selling somebody some fruit trees, seedlings. And these nurseries were owned, several of them were in this area, in the Adams County area. This was probably the first. This is probably where the whole fruit growing industry got started, at that property on the Quaker Valley Road. Cyrus Christ, first commercial nursery in Adams County, 1850s. So that's where everybody was buying their fruit trees. All right, so Kitty Payne's ordeal was pretty well documented. People gave depositions. It was interesting who came to her defense. White people, black people, Quakers, non-Quakers, residents. I got the list. Tavern owner in Bendersville. They were taken from Bear Mountain, living in Amon and Rachel Jones' house. And now we're trying to find that house, and I think you know where it is. There were roads up on Bear Mountain. It's an interesting place up there, but there are roads, and they intersect near, and so we've defined, and we think we know the property where she was taken. So her kidnapping ordeal was incredible. And after Kitty's kidnapped, she got her freedom again. She did get free. She came back to live in Adams County, but she farmed out her 3 children. I found them in 1860 in 3 different townships with 3 different families. She couldn't take care of her kids after the kidnapping. She was penniless and afraid to live alone. Kitty married Abraham Bryan. Kitty was his second wife. Kitty gave him a daughter, Susan Francis. And Kitty died in 1850 of sadness and is buried at Lincoln Cemetery. But her daughter, Susan Francis, was in the middle of Pickett's charge. Her house, Abraham Bryan's house, would be right in the middle of Pickett's charge. Now, they weren't there at the time of the battle. They fled. But when Susan Francis came back to her home, there was some damage. They continued to live there. And a few years later, she found herself a husband who was dragged here from the South by the Army, and she married a man named Matheson. And I found 7 Gettysburg black women who married men from the South who were dragged here by either the Confederate or Union Army. They were brought here with the armies. They're like, am I in Pennsylvania? Cool. I could get my freedom here. I could get a job here. Hey, and you know what else I could do? I can fight against the Confederacy. And that's what they did. And they joined the U.S. colored troops. Interesting. So here are Kitty's children, Mary and Eliza. And here are Kitty's descendants. I found them. I was searching for them. I'm telling you, 20 years. And Larry Boland called me one day at the Historical Society. He said, Deb, come in and see me. I have something you're going to want to see. I did. He said, they pulled this book off the Payne family records, and there's this book about Kitty Payne saying she's buried at Lincoln Cemetery. She married Abraham Bryan, and it all came together. So, and then I found Kitty's relatives on the internet, and I brought them here in 2008. We had a great big Kitty Payne celebration. We went all over the place, but the most incredible moment was they wanted to walk up Bear Mountain. I took them to the Quaker meeting, and Cyrus Grice's descendants were there. The guy who got Kitty Payne's grandchildren free they were together. Kitty Payne's family with Cyrus Grice's descendants. And then after the meeting, Quaker meeting, they wanted to walk up to Bear Mountain. And I'm like, really? In church clothes, you want to walk up? Okay, come on. I'm good with that. Let's go. So we did, and we went up part way, and we got up there, and there were like 40, 50 of these descendants from all over the U.S. There were about 520-somethings standing there, and they went like this, and they put their wrists together, several of them, and they said, take a picture of this. No chains. You see it? We're on Bear Mountain, and there's no chains. So meeting her descendants was really, really cool. And where they are is Kitty Payne's house where she was enslaved in Virginia. I found the Maddox property, and I found out it was in real estate. And I knew people down there because I spoke at their Civil War Roundtable in Rappahannock County. And I said, I've got Kitty Payne's descendants coming in, and if they had some time to come down to Virginia to meet the Maddox family, and they did, who Kitty had been descended from, and who also had kidnapped her. And they all got along real well. This is a quilt that we ran into. I'm just going to go through this really quickly. Posey Wright was just the sweetest dear woman. She was married to William Wright. I found 6 William Wrights. I used to try to remember them by their wives. But Posey was just a Manalapan friend for a very, very long time. We kept the meeting together. But we found this 1850s quilt. It had 76 signatures, and Kitty Payne's daughter was on one of the quilts, Eliza Payne. So old quilts are worth money because the fabric was in good condition, the colors were right. And then when we found that it was African-American memorabilia because there was a black signature on it, now it's really valuable because the white guys who collect that stuff will try to outbid each other on it. So it's, there's a word my dad would use for that, but I'll spare you. I'll spare you. Okay, come on. Are we moving? Okay, so there is the quilt, but it's really amazing. But that's kind of just a side note. Have you seen this one? This is Mapleton. It's on Route 34 between Biglerville and Bendersville. This was a seminary started by the Quakers. 7 schools I found near Bendersville started by the Quakers. 7. And this is Charles Tyson. This is Mariah, and this is their daughter Mary. She married Zach Peters, and I bet that's him. And they lived in Mapleton, and in the 1870s, she started that school. Cyrus Grice's daughter. And so we know that runaways were hidden in places like that barn. Oh, what happened? Okay, we're good. So Charles Tyson, Gettysburg photographer, buried there at the Quaker meeting. Here's Mariah, his wife, just very plain. This is Isaac, his brother. These good Quakers. Now Cyrus Grice got into his father-in-law's nursery business, and he had a fertilizer company. So big that they had a plant in Baltimore, Susquehanna Fertilizer Company. This is in William Fresnito's book, William Fresnito, and it's called Tree Peddler in Full Costume. Tree peddler. So he was selling trees at the nursery. But look at it. What does it look like? Fireman. But I think it's chemicals. I think he was spraying. I think it's protective gear from, and why are we not wearing that anymore? But tree peddler in full costume. So, what happened? Okay. It's like the little bunkers. But what a distinguished man. Big, beautiful houses. The Guernsey mansion that maybe Greg crawled in once, maybe, or wanted to, I'm sure. I was in it too. There was a wedding across the road. I pulled in and I'm like, oh, I'm going in there. Who's going with me? I'm like, come on, we're going to go crawling in there. It was awesome. I took a plumber in there with me. There was a real rare bathtub that he found. He just went, Rick Snyder, he went crazy over it. So, and these Quakers had children that just did amazing things. This guy, Jesse Kersey Cook, was a Manalan friend that was studying to be a doctor. And he was drafted late in the war, like January of '65. And by a few months later, he died of disease. And he was studying to be a doctor, was a school teacher studying to be a doctor. So this Quaker did serve and didn't work out too well for him. So this is kind of, I sometimes use this as my conclusion, but I don't think I'm done. I think there's more slides. But this is kind of like the wrap up. This was Lydia Wireman of York Springs, supposedly traveled down south with her Bible. And she would knock on doors of slave owners' houses and say, hello, I'd like to come in and talk to you about the scripture. Surely you're a good Christian and you will. Let's talk about the Bible. And they would invite her in and she would read them that scripture about you can't oppress people. You know, this isn't right. Look, don't you want to go to heaven? And don't you want to have a good, history? And this is really the wrong thing to do. But it's her words here that I think are just so cool. She says this. The Friends in Virginia, more than all others, are holding up the light in the world around them, and its beneficial influence is felt and seen in the customs, practices, and cultivation of the county. We of the North know not what it is like to live in the lion's mouth, but we live within reach of its paws, and all our strong cords and cables of laws have not found it sufficient to bind him from assaulting our persons and destroying our property, much less to prevent the destruction of our characters among men. We cannot therefore say how or in what manner our southern brother or sister must labor. Their peculiar circumstances must modify their views. This, however, is a truth everywhere. Quote, faith without works is dead, unquote. Where's that come from? The book of James. And what does that mean? Faith without works is dead. If you say it, but you don't do it, it doesn't mean a thing. Faith without works is dead. If you want to be a Christian and you want heaven, then you've got to follow the scripture. And they were really concerned about these kidnappings. So much, in fact, they formed the Adams County Protection Society, the Manalan Friends did. And they said the object is not to interfere between the master and the slaves, but to use proper means to prevent kidnappings, as we think these people have ample right to be free from being violently seized and dragged into bondage by slaveholders and soul drivers from the adjacent South. So there was real controversy going on here. Now, one really neat thing that I learned out of the Yellow Hill community was learning about the Matthews family. So the Matthews family, Ed Matthews acquired property. You saw Ann Matthews there. Well, I found that they had a son, William, who died young of his injuries from being in the colored troops. And he left a little orphan girl named Jessie, Ellen Matthews, who married a man in Pittsburgh named Robert Van. So this poor little orphan girl who had a really rough childhood meets a man in Pittsburgh who's studying to be an attorney, and he becomes a newspaper publisher and publishes the Pittsburgh Courier, which becomes the #1 Negro newspaper in America. And his wife is from Biglerville. And she christened the USS Jesse L. Van with a bottle of champagne. It was sunk in 1938, had a very short life. Here's Jesse with Maury Amsterdam, yucking it up. I think a school should be named for Jesse Ellen Matthews Van. She took over the Courier after he died. Here she is with Shirley Temple. So Robert Lee Van, subject of this book, historical marker on him in Pittsburgh. This came out of the Yellow Hill community. 3 sons in the U.S. Colored Troop, all in Company I of the 127th. 2 of the 3 boys were shot, one in the head, one in the right leg. They all survived, but William died young of his injuries, and his wife died the year before, leaving Jesse as an orphan. But an incredible story of this poor little orphan girl that ends up, and when Bob died, she got flowers, telegrams from Ella Fitzgerald, Joe Louis, the Ink Spots. That was her circle of friends. She was featured on Ralph Edwards' This Is Your Life. She was that famous. A black woman from Biglerville. Here she is, christening the USS Robert L. Van. She was on Eisenhower appointed her the U.S. International Development Committee, and here she is with Premier Nehru of India, representing the United States, meeting the Premier of India. Here she's friends with, she went to teas on the Eisenhower farm with Mamie and knew Eleanor Roosevelt. Here she is with Eleanor Roosevelt. Okay, here's my wrap up. All right. What did these Quakers do? So they helped the people of Yellow Hill. They were, black folks were working on these Quaker farms. Ed Matthews' sons from Yellow Hill were working on Cyrus Grace Nursery. And if you know Tom Piper, he's since gone on, but I talked to Tom about, doesn't this prove that there were black labor starting helping the fruit? Yes, Debbie, I think that's a very real claim that you could absolutely make. So these 2 communities, the black folks of Yellow Hill, aided the Quakers on their farms. They performed duties in their homes. They took care of their children, their farms, their animals, their businesses, were very much part of the economy here. So these Quakers, several schools, the Quaker Valley Country Club, that was in Guernsey. Bobby Phillips, Jack Phillips is an attorney here in Gettysburg. Bobby was a sweetie. Oh my gosh, she was the nicest lady, but she said when she was a little girl, her dad was an attorney, and she remembered going to the Quaker Valley Country Club with him when he played golf and tennis there. In Guernsey, temperance societies, don't drink, save your money, be a good planner. Anti-slavery societies, 1817, there was a Quaker from Bendersville at the Philadelphia Society to Protect the Sable Descendants of Africa, the Adams County Protection Society, the Underground Railroad, Agricultural Club, which became the Fruit Growers Club, the Trilogy Club. It's still alive. It's a literary society for Quaker women. And they're still doing it. They were always into education and reading. Penn State Fruit Research Lab. Chester Tyson, Charles Tyson's son, advocated to State College. We need research. We need science. Get down here and have this fruit lab. Entomologists come to Biglerville and study our bugs. And it's because a Quaker man convinced Penn State to have the Penn State Fruit Research Lab on University Drive in Biglerville. And there's a Tyson building up on main campus, named for this Adams County Tyson family. Libraries, interstate farm supply businesses, Quaker, Susquehanna Fertilizer, tanneries, warehouses. There's a tomato canning factory on the Quaker Valley Road. nurseries. So a whole lot of our early industries here were because of these Quakers. So I've just tried to elevate their stories. Just what I learned, I thought was just pretty amazing. And I just wanted to tell some of their stories. I just want to close with a few things. So you've seen the movie Glory, right? 54th Massachusetts, right? And why wasn't it the 54th Pennsylvania? Because Governor Curtin didn't want black troops right away, and the Massachusetts governor did. So when we watched that movie the first time, when it came out, we didn't know there were any Adams County men in that unit. Well, I wrote my book, and I published it, and I was in Florida a few years ago, and I got this call on my phone from a guy in Ohio named Ben Davis. Ben Davis says to me, "You wrote a book, and you have a reference to John Woods of Manalapan Township in your book." I said, "Yes, I do. I know it. I remember it." "Yep." He said, "Well, guess what? He had a brother, Stuart Wesley Woods, who was in the 54th Massachusetts." And I said, "From Adams County?" He goes, "From Adams County." So, and he did, and we have proof. Then I talked to John Hoptak, who I hope still has a job at the Gettysburg National Military Park. And John, I told him what I found. He went to the 54th Massachusetts enrollment logs and found 4 other men from Adams County in the 54th. So we didn't know that when we watched the movie 30 years later, and now we know. So doing these Network to Freedom nominations are important to me. Telling Kitty Payne's story is really important to me. I, for $400, sold all my research on Kitty Payne to a professor. When he gave me the check, I was like, cool. Because I'm too busy playing golf to write another book. Like, he took all my research on Kitty Payne, and he was doing a paper on her, and he's published his paper, and he called me and said, maybe you might want to come to Oxford this summer. I'm going to be giving her story at Oxford in England.
Wow.
So I'm in a documentary film on Sunday. It's going to be shown at the seminary. It's at 3 p.m. at Valentine Hall, the Gettysburg Lutheran Seminary. Brian Wade of Harrisburg called me 2 years ago. I'm doing a film on the Underground Railroad. Somebody told me I need to talk to you, and would you be in this? I told these stories, and the film covers 6 counties. Adams County is one of them, and it will be featured this Sunday at 3 at the seminary. So I'm inviting you all to head out there and do that. So I just want to close by letting you know that I appreciate the fact that you care enough to want to learn this history. I think the progressive actions of some of these people, and let me tell this and be very clear about this. It was white and black in this freedom fight. The black people were the first people who took their freedom themselves. They ran. That was the first civil disobedience. They were defying the law. They ran on their own. They were the freedom fight. It started with the black people who ran away, but other people helped them. Other people helped them, gave them food, gave them jobs, showed them where the next safe house is. So together, this is how I see the Underground Railroad, black and white, people just caring about people. Christians who just believe that it doesn't matter if my eyes are blue and yours are brown, and your hair is red and mine is brown, or your skin is white and theirs might be a little bit brown, but we're all children of God. We've all got red blood pumping through our veins. We are all the same on the inside. I saw Buddy Guy in York, Pennsylvania perform a song called Skin Deep. It was about the fact that we're all the same under the skin. We all bleed red blood. We're all the same. But these people were so progressive. And to meet descendants of Ed Matthews that I did in finding Alicia Wansel Sanders, who is now a very good friend of mine, it was just like serendipitous. Just like I've been thinking about these people and I want to meet them and I want to bring their ancestors around and tell them the stories and hook them up with the people who kidnapped them and people who freed them, and that we all can get along and forget about all the stuff that divided us one day and just be humans. So thank you so much for tonight and being here and filling up the room. Congratulations to the Cashtown Inn for reviving this beautiful, beautiful building. And thank you very much for coming. Do you have any questions? Anything fuzzy that you want me to clear up?
The people that lived on Yellow Hill, were they descendants of slaves?
Oh, yeah. Oh, they were enslaved themselves. You know what really, really amazed me in my research? When I went through the microfilm looking for the black people in Manawan and Butler Township, and I would see, you know, they're mulatto, and then it would say, where were you born? And they would say, Maryland, Virginia. I'm like, oh my gosh, you are dead if somebody wants to question you. Why are you black living in Adams County in 1850? Where are your papers? Where are your manumission documents? Show them to me. Ed Matthews of Yellow Hill, I don't think he ever was manumitted, given his freedom. I think he was born free. I think his family was from Pike Creek, Carroll County, Maryland, where Quakers were. Because in Pike Creek, Carroll County Quaker meeting, I found a tombstone of a Quaker, a white Quaker named Matthews. So it's my assumption that I've never found a manumission document on the Matthews family that they were enslaved by Quakers in Maryland who gave them their freedom. So he was probably born free. I've never found it. They're related to the Biggs family. Anybody watch Henry Louis Gates?
All the time.
All the time. The Anna Duvere Smith segment. Well, I was so excited because I got a call one day from Skip Gates' crew.
Oh my God.
Not him, but somebody saying, I'm from Dr. Henry Louis Gates. I'm like, Skip. Because Betty Baker from the Links knows him personally from Martha Vineyard. And that's what she calls him. So I call him Skip. But I was in the credits when they did Anna Duvere. And she has been coming to Gettysburg. And she's related to Basil Biggs and Ed Matthews. And she's met Alicia Wansel. And Tim Smith just ran into him over the weekend. He's like, oh, we got to get Anna wants your book signed. And I'm like, okay, I'll see if I can. I'll try. So great things are happening. The Black history here in Gettysburg is pretty incredible. And we've got some people who we're doing some Black history tours and talking about some of this, John Hoptack in particular. So read the books, learn a little bit more, and be amazed at what I found that some of these people did that lived here. Who walked on this land before us? You know, what did they do? Where were they? How are we affected? And can we carry that torch? Can we do a little bit better to be a little more welcoming, a little more kinder, a little more gentler with our fellow human beings? All right, I think that should do it. Any other questions from you?
I wonder what would happen if a family got caught?
Oh, imprisonment. And the fines were horrendous. The federal fugitive slave law was enacted like 1793, I think, and then made really stronger in 1850. The fines were, you know, I think how I used to define it was, if you got caught, your family would probably have to sell their property to get the money to pay the fine to get you out of jail. Thousands of dollars. No one here ever got caught in Adams County. No one ever got caught. But there were close calls. I have a letter that they were meeting in a schoolhouse near York Springs, and they did it by candlelight, and they had a guy posted in the woods in case anybody came and there was trouble. And they were talking about buying the freedom of someone, putting their money together to go purchase freedom for someone who was enslaved. So they had to be on guard, and they couldn't let everybody know that they were doing this kind of activity. They were under the radar.